Alright, I'm probably going to make this a quicker video because I'm actually flying out to Chicago tomorrow, mainly to see family, but I'm also going to be going to the final home game of the season against the Wizards, and I still haven't started packing. Hit me up, by the way, if any of you are going to be at that game. I'll be there with my daughter, taking her to her first game at the United Center. Now, as for this game, a weird approach and strategy to this one that has gained a lot of discussion on social media. So obviously the Bulls opted to rest their key players, their best players, and Kobe White, Josh Giddey, Nikola Vucevic. Now, Giddey and Vuce were evidently out for actual injuries, while Kobe White was out for load management purposes. And the reason this was odd and somewhat frustrating to a lot of Bulls fans is that the Bulls opted to decide to rest players now when they're still fighting for seeding in the play-in, and also the fact that they've been preaching the integrity of the game, pushing to win, to create a winning mindset in the players. And then in a game where they actually could fight for something, they decided to rest guys. Now, look, I'll say my piece on that here before getting into the game, and I talked about this briefly on Twitter. So while I get the frustration, and as you guys know, I am not a fan of throwing games, manufacturing losses, tanking, what have you, and I don't like the strategy the Bulls are taking here, but I saw a lot of people saying the Bulls purely did this so they can get home court advantage in the play-in and collect that play-in revenue instead of fighting for an 8 seed. Well, first, there is a bit of flawed logic in that thinking. One, by the Bulls moving up to the 8 seed, they would still get postseason home revenue of some kind, either in the form of the second play-in if they lost that first play-in game, since they would play at home against the winner of the 9-10 matchup, or if they win that 7-8 play-in matchup, that gets them a spot in the playoffs. And they would have home playoff games at a minimum for games 3 and 4 of that first round series. So the argument that, well, the Bulls threw this game so they could take the 8 seed off the table and get to play at home as the 9 seed instead of on the road as the 8 seed doesn't really work here, because they would get some postseason home game revenue regardless. Now, the argument I do get is, well, look, if the 8 seed is still a possibility, which gives you 2 opportunities to try and get into the playoffs rather than a win-or-go-home game in the 9-10 matchup and then still needing to win the second play-in game to even make it in, which the Bulls have failed to do the last 2 seasons, then you should do everything in your power to try and win and get the 8 seed, and I 100% agree with that. Here's how I'm sure the Bulls are looking at it, though. They likely see the 8 seed as a remote possibility even if they went out, including the game they had tonight, which is true. Getting the 8 seed was still a tall order going into tonight's game. And they probably looked at this game and said, this is likely going to be an L. And if we play all of our guys, have them go all out, and we have a game tomorrow back at home against Miami, a game that if we win, they would all but lock up the 9th seed because they hold a tiebreaker over the Heat if they win. And they said, all right, rather than risking losing both games, because we all know the second night of a back-to-back is always more challenging regardless of your opponent, especially this late in the season with the amount of minutes players have played and have accumulated over the season. And if we lose both of those back-to-back games, we're actually looking at the 10 seed now instead of the 9th. I'm not saying I like the strategy, I'm not saying I agree with it, because it could very much backfire if they end up losing to Miami anyway, which isn't a guarantee, especially when they've been playing so much better. I'm just saying that I get it. I get the rationale, and I don't think there is this weird ulterior motive where ownership is just looking to cash in on some home play and revenue. They likely went into tonight and said, do we think we can win this game at full strength? And if not, let's not put ourselves in a position to risk falling to 10th, but try and secure the 9th seed instead. Now, we'll see if the strategy pays off, but regardless, I wasn't as outraged by this decision as some friends were, because I get the rationale behind it. And let's be real, when you've got win-or-go-home games coming up, yeah, the focus should be on ensuring they win those games, and the guys have some rest going into those games. Now, when it comes to this game, I mean, the Bulls got blown out, which was to be expected. However, the young guns actually played decently well and even kept it interesting when they went that 16-0 run the third quarter and brought the lead within single digits. Then we saw the second Cavaliers come through and they finished the Bulls off. But the guys played hard. They were hustling, which makes sense. Some of these guys are fighting for playing time, contracts, but the guy I was most impressed with, and I don't know if I should say impressed, if that's the right word, because of course he finally has the best game of his season when the stakes are so low and no one else is playing, but give Patrick Williams credit, who put up a season high 21 points, his first 20-point game of the season, which is pretty wild and ridiculous at the same time. But in watching Pat, it made me realize the Bulls just need to keep using him as a spot-up shooter, a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. Like, it's sad that we've gotten to this point, but Pat can't really do much of anything else. He's a liability when it comes to handling the ball. He can't drive to the basket effectively and finish. He can barely put down dunks, for crying out loud. But where he has excelled is catching the ball off the screen or a kick out and knocking it down from 3. Like, Pat hasn't shot the 3 ball as well as we're used to seeing from him this season, but that's because he's trying to create a lot of his 3-point shots rather than playing off the ball and getting open for kickouts. Pat was 5 for 6 from downtown in this game. We haven't seen that all season. Now, the Cavs weren't really guarding him heavily, which helps, but hopefully it gives Pat the confidence needed going forward. Put up 21 points for Pat, also 5 assists on 7 for 11 from the floor. And then Miles Bucelis, who I thought would maybe go off in this game with all the guys being out, but he still had a solid game, a very balanced game actually, where he put up 19 points, shooting 50% from the field, had some sick drives to the basket, showing off some more of those handles, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Been great seeing Modest get more confidence, more minutes in his game and creating his own shot, playing through contact. Jalen Smith got the start tonight, also odd considering he's been out of the rotation in favor of Zach Collins behind Vucevic, but Collins still came off the bench. Smith had a solid game as well, 13 points, 10 rebounds, and then I will say I liked what I saw from Jameer Young and EJ Liddell and their limited contributions off the bench. They were active and productive in non-garbage time minutes, and then of course Dalen Horton-Tucker. Of course, THT got some of the most minutes in this game and put up 17 points. But anyway, kind of an uneventful game outside of seeing what some of the young Bulls can do. The Hawks did lose to the Magic, so I believe that locks up the 7 seed for the Orlando Magic, while the possibility of the 8 seed still exists for the Bulls if they can win their final 3 games and have the Hawks lose 2 of their final 3. But they're also playing taking teams, so unlikely. The big game is going to be tomorrow against the Miami Heat, and whether the Bulls can lock up the 9 seed. Now, I may or may not be able to do a post-game video for that game, as I'll be getting into Chicago in the evening and maybe tricky in the hotel room with the kids, but I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, though, guys, you let me know what you thought of this game. You let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.